Bond breaks into the skyscraper. He just starts walking around in a suit and tie with his gun out for some reason. He hacks the safe with his fingerprint scanner. There's like some cool spy stuff as he's breaking and entering to the secret lab here. It's all cool. I like that the safe is like money, drugs, porn, and the GPS scrambler.
At the secret lab, Bond and Michelle Yeoh have both broken in here separately, trying to find all that good stuff. And Bond ends up finding, while he's here, the GPS repositioning satellite. Now, we saw this in that terrorist bazaar at the beginning. Henry Gupta was there with it. This is it's a goober. I don't know. I just watched Spider-Verse again. Now I've got goober in my head. It is the MacGuffin that apparently can trick a ship's GPS locator, I guess. And so Bond finds it and steals it back.
So Bond, there's some really good espionage stuff going on here. Bond sneaks into Carver's headquarters, into that building, and he steals the MacGuffin. They call it the encoder, I think. It's a red box with a bunch of digital numbers on it.
But this time, the spy operation is not screwed up by James Bond, it's screwed up by Michelle Yeoh. He'd have screwed it up eventually and had to fight his way out, but it's kind of refreshing that like he infiltrated something and didn't immediately set off all the alarms and get a bunch of guys shooting at him. But, of course, at the end, a bunch of guys are shooting at him and the alarm's going off anyway, but it's fine. Bond breaks a $300 million satellite just because he thinks it might slow the guys chasing him down by like 0.4 seconds.
I'm slowly losing my job as a numbers guy here, because the villains in the past two films, including this one, weren't really talking about specific amounts of money, just more power. Janice/Alec in GoldenEye was a common thief, but if you empty out a bank or a country's bank, it's really hard to quantify that. And we're being to the point where inflation is a lot less, drastic. There's a couple of notes in this movie on how much stuff costs. At one point, Gupta's like, watch out for this satellite, it's worth $300 million. Not 5 minutes later, it's smashed to bits. It's hilarious. I mean, that's $485,828,037.38 now, so like, yeah, but it's not the price of gold in 1967 more, it's just more.
Why did the security guards at like CNN all have MP5s? Bond beats up a bunch of security guards who are basically just doing their job, and then he beats the shit out of some guy wearing like a red vest. He's dressed like Kenneth from 30 Rock. That guy is just like, hey, you're not allowed to be here, so Bond beats that guy's ass, snaps his arm, and then throws him into a printing machine where he gets mulched by the machinery, and then has like some kind of snarky one-liner. Oh, they'll print anything these days. And it's like, dude, Bond, that was psycho. That was like, that guy was probably like a minimum wage employee, and you just like straight up murdered him.
My favorite kill in the movie is definitely during that fight in Carver's building. There's this guy that's like thrown into like the newspaper printer. It's pretty brutal.
Bond drives to his hotel parking lot, parks diagonally across like 3 spots, and then, as if that's not like dick enough, then he activates the security protocols on his car that will electrocute anybody that tries to touch it. Bond finds Terry Hatcher dead in his hotel room, and I like the touch of him hearing the news on the TV as he's discovering it in real life. She was found murdered, and there was like an unidentified man in there with him, gunshot wound to the head, and he's like, oh man.
So there's already a public news report about Ms. Carver, but nobody has the body blocked off? You'd think the local authorities would be a little upset by this.
And then we get introduced to the best character in the entire movie, which is Dr. Kaufman. He's just wonderful. I'm a professor of forensic medicine. Believe me, Mr. Bond, I could shoot you from Stuttgart and still create the proper effect. It's great. I love this character.
Dr. Kaufman feels like he walked right off the set of Austin Powers. It's sad that they had to, they essentially had to kill off Lois Lane's character. The way Pierce Bronson, like, kisses her after she's already dead is a little creepy.
I like the guys trying to break into Bond's car. They're like hitting it with sledgehammers and shooting with machine guns, crowbars, nothing. Machine gun bullets will later break the front windshield of this car, but for right now, you can do whatever you want to it and it won't break the front window of this car.
Elon Musk should have used whatever glass Q Branch did for this BMW. Oh shit, another cold kill with Dr. Kaufman. I love it. I could feel Bond's disgust at this guy.
A throwaway role and character, Dr. Kaufman was played by another late actor I truly enjoy, Vincent Schiavelli. I don't have much to say about him in this film and this dumb accent, but I really enjoy him in everything else he's been in.
Kaufman is hilarious and awesome, and Brosnan is great as Bond, basically trying everything he can to not die, but more or less like resigning himself to the fact that he is going to be murdered by this man.
So Bond goes back to his hotel and finds that Elliot has had his wife killed and has a guy here who's going to kill Bond as well and make it look like it was a murder-suicide thing. I don't quite understand why Elliot had his wife killed. I mean, like, he sent her there. I guess maybe he was like, I'm going to send you to go get information from James Bond, but if you have sex with him, I'm going to kill you. I don't know. It seems awful. I mean, clearly it's awful. He's a bad guy. But anyway, this bad guy, the one who's here to kill Bond, is like monologuing at him, and he knows all about James Bond. They know everything about him. Villains always know everything about James Bond except for the fact that he has gadgets. So in this case, what happens is they need to unlock the car, and Bond says that his cell phone unlocks the car, tells the guy what buttons to press to set off a taser and zap the guy. They never see the gadgets coming.
The movie only has one gadget that is worth the title of Best Gadget. It's the damn phone. It has a fingerprint scanner / display unit, a 20,000 volt stun gun capable of opening doors and shocking crazy doctors, and a remote control for his awesome car.
Damn, this is stone cold. Bond shoots Dr. Kaufman in the head with his own gun in a way to make it look like a suicide. And the line is great. Kaufman's like, I'm just a professional doing my job. And Bond's like, me too. Bam. Awesome. Love it. The remote control car chase in the garage is great. The car's dropping caltrops, there's explosions, there's missiles, there's like a lot of like exciting chase sequences and crashes and stuff, even though the entire thing takes place like in less than a city block for of floor space. And yeah, it's wonderful. I like that the car is a German woman who keeps complaining about his driving.
So then we get the parking garage scene. This is such a cool action scene. Like we mentioned earlier, this BMW has all the gadgets. It's got missiles, it has tires that reinflate themselves, there's a rear view camera, which seems like a little ahead of its time. It's very cool.
Bond heads back to his car, but it's surrounded by goons, so he takes remote control of it and drives it over to him, rolls the window down, jumps in the back seat. And then we have my favorite chase scene in the James Bond franchise, because it is a chase scene where James Bond is in the backseat of the car using his little cell phone in order to drive the car around through this parking garage. And he just can't find his way out of the parking garage. He drives it all over the place. His windows get shot up. There's a great part where a guy shoots a rocket launcher at the car and it just goes straight through the open windows because the windows have been shot out, and then hits the car behind him. I like to imagine that his best friend was driving that car behind him and he's really devastated about the loss of his friend Jerry. But then Bond can't figure out how to get out of the parking garage, so ultimately he jumps back out of the car and drives the car off the roof, and it goes smashing into an Avis building across the street because it was a rental car.
So the actual chase of the car chase scene aside, this vehicle had more gadgets than what Q mentioned. And I think one of the problems, if you want to call it that, with previous Bond films is it's almost like a video game, and that someone's like, here are the exact things that you are going to need, and then there is always a use for them. There's no surprise, and nothing ever gets left behind. Everything is used. But then this car has this little conveniently placed chain cutter, which, like, it's dumb, it's a little too perfect, but it was never mentioned, and I love that. Also, the perfectly placed Avis car rental was the icing on the cake.
The second best part of this movie is the BMW chasing in the garage. That remote control is awesome. I actually remember the Sony Ericsson phone, not the flip-up part, the black and white normal part, but all the gadgets on this car are even more than the Z8 the last film. I mean, Let's start with the safe in the car. It's like a black box on the BMW. Next, the rockets in the sunroof, the caltrops that come out the back, self-inflating tires, though I'm surprised they didn't have run flats, the hood ornament saw blade, which I do have issues with because it's only useful in one specific instance in real life, but it's a pretty epic chase that ends with the car going off the roof into the rental car agency across the street. It doesn't get better than that here, folks.
Bond evades all the bad guys, ramps his car off the roof, jumps it over a busy street, and plants it right through the front window of an Avis. And then he just laughs. It's great.
So now Bond's got the GPS satellite thingy. He meets up with the guy who's not J.W. Pepper in order to find out like what's going on with it. And they figure out that it's out of sync, so it's been tampered with. They use that tampering to figure out where the ship that was sunk in the beginning was actually at, because it turns out it was actually in Chinese waters, and that's bad. But it turns out it's actually Vietnamese waters. I was confused about this. But anyway, Bond does a halo jump, which was big in this era. I remember it from Metal Gear Solid 3 as well. And he does the halo jump into the waters, and he's swimming around in the ship. He finds out that some missiles have been stolen. He also finds Michelle Yeoh in the ship because they're both investigating this again. And Bond's like, hey, here's me and Michelle Yeoh hanging out in the water. They surface. There's a boat nearby. And Bond starts to get real excited because he has a fetish for boats. But unfortunately, Mr. Stamper's on the boat, and that's a real buzzkill.
So we see the return of the "Hey Jimbo" guy from GoldenEye, whose name is Jack Wade. And I was like, man, this guy is really similar. He seems really similar to like a JW type. And I just realized that his initials are JW. That is my headcanon now. This is JW.
First, can I give a shout out to Jack Wade, "Hey Jimbo," for making a quick appearance in this film? I mean, he's less intensive than the last one, but this time he actually helps Bond out. My favorite part of his appearance is like, hey, Bond is about to jump into Vietnam, not international waters. Does he have anything identifying him? And Wade's like, yeah, the parachute, gear, suit, tank. And he's like, oh yeah, he didn't even say goodbye.
I do think it's really funny that there's like all these military guys and like full, military regalia. And Jack Wade just has like a tropical dinosaur shirt. Like he always looks like he's on vacation.
There's a great little part where Sergeant Apone from Aliens gives Bond the once-over on like how halo jumps work, and then Bond is off.
I love how all these military professionals just yeet Bond off the plane, knowing he's probably going to become a POW in Nam.
So then Bond does a halo jump into a scuba dive, because it's been a couple movies since we had a scuba diving scene.
My only critique about the scene is that they were really doing a halo dive. They would not have opened the door for Bond to jump out without all of them wearing oxygen masks.
The halo jump is a super cool stunt, a very dangerous feat of skydiving, but we've kind of been spoiled by Mission Impossible Fallout, so it doesn't quite have the same like excitement here. But it is very cool, and I like that we get some really great shots of a practical stunt, which is awesome. And then when he detaches, he drops straight into the water and goes immediately down on a dive into the Devonshire. Bond runs into Michelle Yeoh at the bottom of the sea while they're both like investigating the Devonshire. What they're doing is pretty dangerous diving, but it's probably in a controlled environment, but like what they're doing there is pretty dangerous diving stuff. But I've said before that like it's hard to make underwater stuff look cool in the movies because everything's just slow and people are out of their element, so it's really awkward looking.
I'm glad the movie didn't take the time to give you a realistic sense of how deep this ship sank, but at this point all I can hear is Elliot saying, "Nobody will ever find this military vessel in 300 feet of water."
They have to swim out through the torpedo tube without their oxygen tanks, which is very dangerous, but they do it and they swim up, but then they're immediately picked up by Stamper and captured. One of the greatest line of this movie, and I think one of the greatest lines ever written, is when Carver is like, "The distance between insanity and genius is measured only by success." I think that's genius. So Carver is going to leave them to be tortured by Stamper, who is basically just going to stab their balls with dental tools until they die. Stamper is played by Goetz Otto, who's basically done this movie, and he's played a bunch of Nazis, most notably in Iron Sky. There's not that much to him other than that he's like big and German, and he's got that bleach blonde 311 hair that was considered highly punchable even in the mid-90s. Carver talks a big game, but the second he turns around, Bond and Wei Lin just beat the shit out of everyone while handcuffed together, and the High Sparrow doesn't even get to leave the room before Bond's whipping a genital torture device into Stamper's cargo pants.
Now we get another of the most memorable sequences in the film, because after Elliot Carver does his whole villain monologue at Bond and Michelle Yeoh's character, they of course have to escape from his building, and do so handcuffed together, so their wrists are handcuffed together, by jumping down the side of the building while holding on to these ropes that are attached to a giant banner of Carver's face, so that it rips his face in half as they slide down the building. It's great.
There is a part towards the end of the craziness that is Vietnam time, where James and Wei Lin jump off a building, grabbing a banner to stop their slide. This is insane. I work at a sign shop, and I mean, our banner is high quality, but even if they use the highest quality material for their banner, that's basically 70 feet tall, its tear strength is just over 100 pounds. Bond's what, 210? Wei Lin another 110? Forget it even holding their weight, it would tear out all the grommets tying the banner to the building. I mean, that cable would go through it like butter. They would just fall off the building. Down 70 stories.
I like the fighting while handcuffed. I think it's kind of a Jackie Chan homage. He did this back in Project A2 in 1987. He's done it a couple times since then. And Michelle Yeoh has been in a bunch of Jackie Chan movies, so I think that this like handcuffed together, fighting each other, like rappelling down the banner on the side of the building is a bit of a Jackie Chan homage, which is cool.
I do like, they end up stopping a little bit before, well, a lot before any surface that they can get to, and they're hanging out outside the window in this office building, and like, not everybody who works for Carver is aware that he's killing spies upstairs, right? So you'd think that the people working on this building would be like, oh my god, there are two people hanging outside the window, we should figure out how to open the window and help them in. But instead they just stand there watching as they have to kick the window in and smash their way into the building, and then just calmly leave and hop on a motorcycle.
Finally, here it is. I could see it from afar. Bond and Wei Lin have just escaped Carver for the second time. The camera is wide and they haven't even left the building, but I spotted that ivory tank and funky jet intake fender among all those other motorcycles. One of my all-time favorite motorcycles ever made, the Bmw R1200c. It released the same year as this film, and was BMW's introduction to the cruiser market. They didn't last long, they're geared pretty damn slow for such a beast of a motor. You can't really ride them around the lower half of the US thanks to their air-cooled motor, but by god, that is such a gorgeous piece of engineering. The chase scene is cool too.
The main locale in this movie is, of course, China, and I kind of wish Bond went to China more often, because some of those sequences were some of the most unique action sequences in the Bond movies. I loved it. I thought it was great. A lot of the shots were just absolutely gorgeous. It felt different from a lot of the previous movies.
I like them fighting over which secret agent is going to drive the bike, and then they compromise by each of them getting a handlebar, which seems like it would be very difficult to do, but you see stunt people doing this in the chase sequence, so it's cool.
After Bond and Wei Lin escape, they're both handcuffed together and they steal a motorcycle. This is another amazing action sequence. This is freaking crazy and I love it. Even though the chase sequences in this are completely bonkers, they don't overdo it like the Roger Moore movies, you know? I think this is just the right amount of camp.
Now Bond's got to outrun killers with Michelle Yeoh in his lap, and this is like why all guys want to be James Bond.
Now they get into a motorcycle chase where Bond and Michelle Yeoh's character are still handcuffed together. There's a helicopter chasing them while they're on a motorcycle, and they have to do all these shenanigans of like who's sitting where in order to still drive the motorcycle, and it's very, very cute. And they jump over the helicopter and the motorcycle. At one point they slide under the helicopter. They get into all kinds of nonsense.
Bond pops a wheelie, probably pops a boner, he pops a sick ramp, he blows up half of Saigon, he jumps over a helicopter.
My biggest question, though, is how is Elliot Carver going to explain away the fact that one of his helicopters turned its blades towards the ground and just ripped the crap out of this marketplace? That seems like a hard thing to cover up, even if you are a media mogul.
I don't think helicopter rotors work like this. We get a really like gratuitous shower sequence, and then she blue balls him and leaves him handcuffed to some shitty Vietnamese hovel.
Wei Lin gets jumped by a bunch of dudes, and this whole scene reminds me of The Man with the Golden Gun, where Bond doesn't do anything for that entire fight with the detective and his two sisters.
I like the fight scene of Michelle Yeoh just like beating the crap out of a bunch of guys. That's awesome. And I love that when the last guy gets the drop on her with the pistol, Bond walks up and just slaps the guy in the back of the head really hard. And when the guy turns around, like, what the hell? Then Bond knocks him out. I think that's a nice touch. I like it.
Michelle Yeoh really just screamed, "Yeah!" right before shooting a control panel.
I like the Chinese keyboard gag, and I like this entire thing, right? I'm always a big fan of walls of guns and gadgets and stuff, especially when they are like popping out of things that seem mundane. And her office ends up being the entire Q branch gag, right? Like the keyboard that James Bond can't work. There's a bunch of like fun gadgets and like interesting things going on in there.
Since Q didn't really get to give us a Q lab scene earlier in the movie, we instead get the Chinese operative's Q lab scene when Bond follows Yeoh to her headquarters, and she's got all kinds of gadgets there, including a dragon that shoots fire. It's pretty cute. It's nice to see that other agencies in the James Bond universe have the same sort of gadget nonsense.
In the secret room, she has an entire rack of, I think this gets lost in the shuffle because there's all these other gadgets and like rows of guns, but like she has an entire rack of nunchucks. It has like 20 pairs of nunchucks on it. That's a woman I could love.
There's a weird moment inside of Wei Lin, is that her name? Michelle Yeoh's Q Labs, where Bond is like looking at a gun, and then he looks at her, and like suddenly he's got like "I'm horny for you" face, and the music kicks in with some "I'm horny for you" music, and then he cocks his gun, and she looks up and smiles at him, and it's like Bond didn't realize that this woman was a potential object for his sexual conquest until he was holding a gun in his hands, and then he was like, hey, I could get down with that.
We see Bond switch to the Walther P99. He's used the PPK since the early 60s. We switch him over to the Walther P99 here. I have a theory. I don't remember the next two Bond movies very well. I never saw the fourth Pierce Brosnan one. I remember the third one with Denise Richards unfavorably. So I'm wondering if we can start... There's that Star Trek Riker theory where like... And there's that Star Trek theory just in general where once Riker gets the beard and once Sisko gets the beard, that's when the show gets good, right? So I wonder if P99 is like bad Pierce Brosnan James Bond. I wonder if this is the transition point. We'll see in the future movies.
Another point that Bond has come up with some money is a boat ride from Vietnam to the islands of the South China Seas, which, interestingly enough, is where they filmed The Man with the Golden Gun. Bond's supposed to pay this captain $5,000, which is $8,000 now. I will say that Vietnam has always been one of the least valued currencies in history, and even is worth less than the Zimbabwe dollar for a period of time. So the $8,000 would be worth about 115,424,000 Vietnamese dong. And for a scale of reference, a beer cost about 6,000 Vietnamese dong, so what, 30 cents American dollars? A luxury 5-star hotel is like 83 million dong for a month. So that boat captain may be a little bit overcharging.
So they board the stealth ship. Bond stabs a man in the heart and watches him die, like makes eye contact with that guard while that guard is dying. Then he throws him out to be machine gunned, have his dead body like shot more, and then drop into the ocean to sink and be eaten, presumably by fish.
Some bad stuff that stood out, that fake karate crap that Carver does after Wei Lin attacks him. Really, dude? Was that necessary? Yeah.
I know it's like problematic on a variety of levels and like not cool nowadays or whatever, but the High Sparrow doing the fake kung fu to mock Wei Lin is actually kind of funny.
They end up figuring out where Elliot's boat is and sneak aboard just in time to get it to show up on radar before the British and military naval fleets start firing at each other. So that's good. And the way Bond gets it to show up on radar is kind of cool. He makes this little bomb out of a tiny explosive that he's got. by putting that onto a glass jar with an active grenade in it, so that when the tiny explosive goes off, it shatters the jar, which makes the handle on the grenade go off, so that the grenade's now active, and then he puts that underneath some big tanks of gas or whatever, so that then they'll explode. So it makes this giant explosion out of this little tiny explosive. I like the MacGyvering of that almost, where he has to like put different pieces together in order to make this explosive.
I like that Bond and Wei Lin are here. Like, I know it might be kind of pointless because both governments have been notified that there's this stealth ship and they're both out looking for it. But I like that they were like, well, we can't be sure that the governments receive those messages. We got to go on and we got to do this ourselves, just as a failsafe. And you start to think for a little bit like, okay, well, the Royal Navy's got this. They're going to take care of this. But in the end, like, Bond and Wei Lin had to be on this ship in order to stop the destruction of Beijing. We get the plot. Carver is going to start a war between China and England. He's also got a plan in place for how that war ends, and that deal ends with him having broadcasting rights in China. So, it's topical, right?
And then in the end, you get a big action scene in this boat where everybody's shooting everybody. Michelle Yeoh's kicking all kinds of ass. James Bond's kicking all kinds of ass. It's a lot of fun. It's the same level of exciting big action scene we've gotten in several of these Bond movies, except without the need to have like a whole military unit involved. It's just two spies up against an army, and they're amazing. It's a super fun action scene.
So the climactic action scene is this massive battle aboard the stealth boat, and while I think this action scene is really good, I do think it drags on for a little bit too long. It feels a little gratuitous at points. I mean, there's a lot of shooting, a lot of machine gun fire, and a lot of explosions, which I don't necessarily have a problem with, but after a while you just start to tune it out.
I like when Carver's like, I have a backup plan, and shoots the guy, and Bond is like completely unfazed. He's like, so do I. And boom, explodes the entire stealth sub. Hey, we get a ninja star kill. I am always in for shuriken kills, and it happens just when I didn't think I could like Michelle Yeoh anymore. I love the Royal Navy dudes and the ship scenes with them. I love when they're just like, right, we'll do it the old-fashioned way. Why is Carver on this boat? Why isn't he in, like, his fancy skyscraper lair? It seems like he doesn't need to be here. And the last time the stealth ship was out on an operation, he wasn't there.
So we're in the ship, and everything's going to hell, and Bond is escaping the assassin. And I know I complained in the previous video how Bond just constantly ditches the PPK, and that kind of shows up again here, where, like, he does have the PPK and the fully auto akimbo, and he's kind of mostly focusing on the fully auto. But I think it's still fun because he's wielding them akimbo, and then he just starts launching those missiles inside the ship. And again, that kind of goes back to the zaniness of Bond, as well as just being resourceful. Like, you know what? You've got a bigger gun than I do, and now I have an even bigger gun than you do.
So there's a big showdown. Everybody's shooting machine guns, launching anti-ship missiles, and firing 40mm grenades inside the ship, which, great. The ship's already going down anyway. Why not? So Michelle Yeoh is cornered, and they make a whole thing out of her pulling the magazine out of her MP5. She looks into it. There's one round in there. There's two guys chasing her. You're like, how's she going to get out of this? She pops around the corner, shoots a steam pipe, blasts both those guys with steam, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. That was clever. Then they follow that up by she shoots it again, and she shoots a different steam pipe, and it hits them a second time. And, like, okay, I get that there was probably one in the chamber and one in the magazine. That makes sense that she would have two bullets, but then, like, why did she shoot the two steam pipes and not just shoot the two guys? Like, I feel like it's, like, a very dumb thing to, like, nitpick about, but I feel like if she didn't shoot that second bullet, that whole scene would have, like, been better. Bond gets blown up by a couple 40mm grenades, but he's fine. Pierce Brosnan is really good at looking bored while murdering people. Like, he'll just be, like, shooting dudes or stabbing guys, and he's got this, like, complete, like, this is just business look on his face, which I think is actually really good acting. I think that's a very good Bond thing, because Bond really doesn't give a fuck, right? He's got a license to kill, and he has used it enough times that he doesn't care, and he's stone cold. He's a borderline psychopath, and I think Brosnan really drives that home with his facial expressions during some of these gunfights. He'll be dual wielding guns, and the look on his face is like he's hacking a computer.
Also, at one point, Carver gets the drop on Bond after Bond shooting up some henchmen. A 55-year-old gentleman sneaks up on a spy, amped up, and armed with a machine gun. I highly doubt that. At least Carver goes out in the most metal way possible. He gets a drill to the face.
Elliot Carver's death is brutal because what Bond ends up doing is driving that big remote controlled drill that has these 3 sets of blades in a triangular setup all pointed inwards. He just drives that into Elliot and just a dude gets eaten by a drill. Ugh.
That said, I love Carver's gruesome death. Very well executed, completely earned. I do, I kind of feel like we should have seen his death. It was implied, and it looked like it was going to be awful, but they cut away. I feel like maybe if they had shown it, this movie would have been rated R, so I guess I get it, but yeah, I feel a little bit gypped.
Holy shit. Carver gets mulched by the ship-killing drill. How do I not remember this part from the first time I watched this movie? How did I forget about this? This is an insane death sequence.
I mean, I guess it's totally expected that Elliot would die by the same weapon he used in the beginning of the movie, but there should have been more blood.
And then that last fight between Bond and Stamper on the missile was pretty intense. Not gonna lie.
This movie had a plethora of allies and henchmen. Much more interesting than the villain and his plot, actually. Let's start with the James Blonde, Richard Stamper, a very serious psychopath. He is an almost capable henchman in the employ of Carver. I think he takes his job too seriously, and he's less objective, because he gets killed fighting Bond on the stealth ship at the end, willing to sacrifice himself as long as he kills Bond. I love that Bond escapes from him by taking the knife out of his chest that was stabbed there earlier. Holy crap.
Bond cutting off his vest to escape Stamper is very has a lot of memories of Timothy Dalton doing it at the end of Living Daylights when he cuts his shoe off and makes the bad guy fall to his death. I don't know if this is an homage or if this is just something else they came up with, but I think it's great. I like it.
At least the movie ends on the remnants of a boat with a girl.
And surprisingly, once again, the movie ends with Bond and a girl on, the wreckage of a boat. It counts, right? I think that counts.
Bond's kiss literally brings Michelle Yeoh back to life, and he ends the movie the way he always ends his movies, in a boat on top of a girl. All in a day's work for James Bond.
In the end, Carver's boat has been blown up. Bond and Yeoh are sitting in the wreckage, and Bond's like, hey, this is a boat. And then they have sex. Probably.
And we get a really nice, in loving memory of Albert Broccoli. He was the producer for every single James Bond movie, and he passed away a year before this one was made. So I like the touch of doing a little in memoriam for him at the end.
I feel like Tomorrow Never Dies holds up pretty well. I hadn't seen this one in a long while, and I didn't remember it this fondly. It could be that just after watching all the other movies back to back, this one, I don't know, it seems a little bit, it seems better than I remember it. And I don't know if that's because, the villain's plot feels very current now, whereas before it just seemed kind of out there. I don't know. I mean, the worst thing I can say about it is that it's no GoldenEye.
Coming hot off GoldenEye, this movie's a miss. It has some great scenes, and the plot is somewhat believable, but it was just missing that extra je ne sais quoi, that extra bit that makes a Bond movie great. Don't get me wrong, it has great Bond girls, the chase scene in the garage is fantastic. It even gives James a bit of heart, but it still doesn't live up to the previous film.
It's a very formulaic, back to basics Bond movie, but I think it works. All the elements are there. I think Pierce Brosnan's pretty good in this movie. Like I said, the Bond women are awesome. Both of them, especially Wei Lin, she kicks a lot of ass.
Speaking of Wei Lin, she's a badass. We finally get a female James Bond worth mentioning. Sure, everyone thought Pussy Galore was hard, but she was an unbelievable lesbian who fell in for Bond after one casual sexual assault. Wei Lin legit had her own mission, goals, and her own Q branch who supplies a random safe house in Vietnam. Bond literally has to call Q, and Wei Lin has a base of operations. The entire time I was watching her, I kept thinking she was the Asian Sarah Connor, or the prototype Melinda Lin from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Best part that she was in, the Spider-Man sequence where she let Bond get all shot up at while she was just walking up a wall, her left hand driving a clutch on the BMW motorcycle chase scene in Vietnam, and the freaking throwing stars in her heels.
And that is Tomorrow Never Dies. I thought it was really good. You have some good gadgets, you have some good spy stuff, there's some cool chases, some fight sequences, the villain is you hate him, and, the henchman could have been a little better, the intro song wasn't quite as up to par with some of the other ones, there's some kind of cheesy 90s stuff in there, and also, following GoldenEye, which is just, I think, a masterpiece. It's not quite as good as that one, but I thought it was really well done, and I really liked it. I had a really good time with it.
Carver's a decent villain, He's cheesy, but, he's a villain. He feels like a Blofeld stand-in, or maybe a Hugo Drax remix.
Henry Gupta, Carver's hacker/fixer/go-to computer guy, played wonderfully by the late, great Ricky Jay. Funny enough, this is a big year for Ricky Jay, as he also starred in a supporting role in Boogie Nights, the same year this movie came out. Gupta was hard to pin down. He was at that terrorist bazaar buying the big red MacGuffin. He controlled missiles, TV satellites. Where did he come from? Where did he get that training? Because let's face it, he didn't serve in the military, yet he had a pretty expanded skill set when it came to terrorism. I'll tell you, most computer people are good at one or two things, not 40. I did read that 2 of the deleted scenes shot, they allowed Ricky Jay to throw cards at Bond. Now, if Ricky Jay in real life could throw a playing card from about 3 to 4 yards into the rind of a watermelon, so he could pierce things. But I'm so glad they didn't put that ridiculousness in a Bond movie.
Stamper is, I think, one of the better henchmen that we've had in the past several movies.
Overall, I didn't hate this movie. There were, I don't know, even with as much as was going on, a lot of it still felt hollow, but it was taking so many steps in the right direction, this new direction. GoldenEye definitely really kind of changed things, and this movie was pushing those boundaries a little bit further. How much more can we change from the Connery and Roger Moore films? So overall, not bad, not my favorite, but I think a really solid addition to GoldenEye.
I love this movie. I had so much fun watching it again. I loved it as a kid, and I still think it's great now. I don't think it's a perfect Bond movie, but really there's not a lot I can complain about it. I think that Michelle Yeoh plays a awesome Bond girl. I think that the villains are really memorable. Elliot Carver's great. Stamper's great. The weird doctor guy who's going to set up the fake death scene for Bond. Well, a real death scene, the fake suicide scene. He's really memorable. So you've got a lot of good stuff there. The chase scene in the remote control car is very good. The chase scene on the motorcycle is very good.
The action scenes are great. The car and all the gadgets was awesome. That always adds a lot of points to a Bond movie for me, Even the scuba diving scene I think it was better than most of the scuba diving we've seen so far. The movie has pretty good pacing throughout. It moves, So yeah, that's Tomorrow Never Dies.
This is a good Bond movie. I think it is objectively good, but to me it is personally great.
Podcasters Assemble Season 003 is a production of the We Can Make This Work Probably podcast network. Find more of our shows at probablywork.com and learn how to contribute to future episodes of Podcasters Assemble by looking us up on Twitter at Casters Assemble or joining our Discord server, link in the show notes. Submissions are always open. Thank you to everyone who was able to contribute to this episode. Be sure to check the show notes for links where you can find them all online. Thank you.
This has been a presentation
of the We Can Make This Work
Probably Network.
Follow us on Twitter
At Probably Work.
For more of our questionable content.
Also, we have a website called probablywork.com.
Podcasters Assemble will return in The World Is Not Enough.
The world is not enough.
Which is tricky for me because I always think this movie should be called The World Is Not Enough because the guy is like gonna take over the world, but it's like never seems like enough. So I always think that this movie is called The World Is Not Enough, but this movie was Die Another Day, and next time we are doing The World Is Not Enough. So stay tuned for that.